And it's a harsh reality, and it's something that's unfortunately ignored with SIL housing at the moment. You could have a bariatric person living there where it might take 10, 15 minutes to even just get them out of bed. So is it a case of let's at least close the door, give them smoke protection, and hopefully the firers will get there within a few minutes. It's high risk. If the house doesn't have fire sprinklers, high risk and high liability for the SILs if the building is not fire safe.
Yeah.
So it's concerning. I'm always banging on, at least get a residential fire sprinkler system in there because it will save lives.
What's that likely to cost?
Probably from 30 to 50,000 these days, and you might be up around 40 to 50,000. So, and you put that in, it's a depreciable, so you can write that off over a few years. To me, it's small change to having that risk.
I guess you obviously can't do it if you're renting, but if they're owning the property, then obviously it's a long-term investment. What do you see as, are there any other challenges for SIL providers when it comes to implementing fire safety measures that you're aware of?
Every SIL provider knows the challenges: compliance, rosters, claims. But what if you could work smarter, grow faster, and make a bigger impact? Welcome to SILosophy, where we have real conversations about what it takes to succeed in supported independent living. This podcast is powered by Tania Gomez Consulting and Resolve. Let's get into it.
Welcome to SILosophy. Today I'm joined by Bruce Bromley from SDA Consulting. Welcome, Bruce.
Thank you, Tania.
So nice to have you here again. Before we get into today's episode, could you give us a little bit of an introduction to your experience in this space and what you do at SDA Consulting?
Sure. So SDA Consulting is part of the Equal Access Group, who are disability access consultants. So we consult to compliance of the built environment for people with disabilities. So full spectrum of buildings. As part of that, we have SDA Consulting, and we also have Evacuation, which deals with emergency evacuation planning, as well as selling a range of equipment to assist in evacuating people with disabilities out of buildings.
And you have a long history in the disability space, being one of the co-authors of the SDA design guidelines also.
That's correct, yes.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I wanted to talk to you today about fire safety in SIL housing, and I guess other emergencies as well, but mostly fire, because this is obviously a large risk for providers. And to start with, I wanted to ask you about why being across fire safety is so important for a SIL provider.
Maintaining life safety for participants. So if there is an emergency or there's a fire, we don't have mass fatalities, which can potentially happen if proper planning and building design isn't applied.
And what should a SIL provider, where should a SIL provider start with understanding what fire safety looks like inside a SIL home?
So all approved dwellings have a building classification. So with houses and residential, there's three classifications. There's Class 1A, which is a standard home, Class 1B, which is a rooming house, which a lot of the SDA and SIL housing has been delivered to at the moment. Actually, sorry, not so much SIL housing, more the SDA. And then you have Class 3, which is supported accommodation room for people with disability. So when we look at the buildings, all SIL homes we've seen to date are Class 1A, which in my opinion is not suitable for SIL. It's not purpose designed, and to me it breaches actually the Building Code of Australia. With those three classifications, at a stretch, you could house people with disability in Class 1B because that has additional fire safety provisions in it, but it still doesn't mandate things like sprinklers. So when you look at a Class 3 building, it's designed for where 10% or more of the occupants require assistance in their day-to-day activity or to evacuate in an emergency. So if we swing that around to the SDA design standards, which the participant profile between SDA and SIL is very similar, the definition of an SDA participant is someone with extreme functional impairment or very high support needs. So that slots straight into that Class 3 building classification. And if you build Class 3 residential care, you must provide fire sprinklers. And currently, when SIL houses are taken on by SIL providers, they're just basic standard houses. And that if there was a fire, you're going to get what we call flashover, which is where you have flames at the ceiling within 2.5 to 3 minutes, which means you're not going to get the opportunity to evacuate people for disability, and you will have fatalities.
Mm. Has there been instances of this?
Not in SIL houses, but there's been plenty of fires in disability accommodation around the country. So it will happen, unfortunately. Um, yeah, hopefully we can start getting legislation changed and force changes to prevent that from happening.
Mm. What should a emergency plan or a fire safety plan include for a SIL provider? What are the important elements for them to think about?
So again, this is going to come down to what building classification. For a Class 1A or Class 1B without fire sprinklers, you're going to be very limited. Whereas for a Class 3, where you do have fire sprinklers, you've got a lot more opportunities. So one of the critical things to remember is staff are not trained for emergency evacuation. So their role should not be to do that. Sorry, just 2 seconds. Let me get your editing. You can edit, can't you?
Yeah.
Yep. Done 2 training sessions and everything's crossing over.
Okay.
Yep. So with the SIL staff members, as they are not trained for emergency evacuation, uh, their responsibility should be to get themselves out of the building in an emergency and save their own lives. Now, that goes against the grain with what most people will tell you, and same with SDA, where we might have SIL providers and on-site overnight assistance within those dwellings. But again, staff are not trained for emergency evacuation. They're not trained to assess risk. If there is a fire, if there is an emergency, those staff members need to get out as quick as they can to save their own lives. Some actionable items I'd suggest for SIL houses would be to prepare personal emergency evacuation plans for every resident. Prepare an evacuation kit. So this is quite critical because, as I said, the staff members have to evacuate and get out as quick as they can. If having an emergency kit there with all the residents' information, a laminated floor plan of the house which identifies where they are, they can meet the first responders when they arrive on site and direct them where participants are and what considerations they may need as part of their evacuation. Build relationships with the fireys. Go down, knock on their door and say, hey, we've got a SIL, we've got people with disabilities. They will have no issues coming up and having a talk to you for improvements and things that you could do to improve safety for participants. It's really refreshing with the fireys how keen and proactive they are with communities in that regards. If fire sprinklers aren't provided, I would be putting fire sprinklers in without question. If it's not possible, so you're renting the house and you can't do that, installing extra fire extinguishers throughout the home is another option. Fire blankets, have those ready to go. So if there is an incident in the kitchen and the like, you can extinguish that hopefully fairly quickly. Ensure smoke alarms are interconnected. So a lot of the older houses will just have separate smoke alarms throughout, whereas with interconnected alarms, if one goes off, they'll all go off, which means at night it's better to alert people, the residents, that there is a need for evacuation. In conjunction with that, install emergency lighting that works with the smoke alarm. So as soon as the smoke alarms are activated, emergency lighting will go off in the corridors and the path of travel to the exit point in the house. And the other option is to provide disposable smoke masks. So there's smoke masks available that will give you a 1 hour breathing time. So it might be a case of at least get those on the participants' heads so they're protected from smoke until the fireys can get on site to undertake the rescue.
Mm. Wow, there's lots of
Bit
tips there.
long-winded, but
No, there's some great tips there. Um, Obviously, providers want to be able to support participants in understanding how to evacuate as well.
Mhm.
How regularly do you feel that they should be doing drills?
Yeah, that's a really tricky question because there's no mandatory requirement for to provide that. I would be suggesting as soon as new staff come on as part of their induction, they're briefed on the um, evacuation plan and how that's managed. I would say you'd be wanting to review it every time a new participant comes in, and probably at least every 3 months, I think. Even just having a 5-minute meeting at the start of the week with staff to say, let's review our evacuation procedures, or once a month to say, these are our participants. Is it worth even trying to undertake an evacuation when it may physically be impossible? You could have a bariatric person living there where it might take 10, 15 minutes to even just get them out of bed. So is it a case of let's at least close the door, give them smoke protection, and hopefully the firers will get there within a few minutes? It's high risk. If the house doesn't have fire sprinklers, high risk and high liability for the SILs if the building is not fire safe.
Yeah.
So it's concerning.
So to reduce that liability is really around what you fit out in the physical home.
Correct. If you've got fire sprinklers, it makes things a hell of a lot easier because the fire sprinkler will activate and will either put the fire out or it's going to slow and control the fire, which means staff can then start assisting with an evacuation because they're not going to have a rapid spread of flame throughout the house. If fire sprinklers aren't in, it's just as I said, and as blunt as it is, you're not going to rescue the participants. That's black and white. Unless they are ambulant, maybe improve livability, you can get them out. But anyone that's using wheelchair or anything like that, trying to get them out within the space of a minute, minute and a half. The fire starts, the smoke alarms will activate after a minute. You're at flashover at 2.5. You're just not physically going to get those people out. And it's a harsh reality, and it's something that's unfortunately ignored with SIL housing at the moment. And that's why I'm always banging on, at least get a residential fire sprinkler system in there because it will save lives.
What's that likely to cost?
Uh, Anywhere probably from 30 to 50,000 these days, and it comes down to how much pressure you have in the mains out the front of the house. So if you've got pressure out there, it'll be closer to the 25, 30,000 mark. If you need a pump or static storage means you just have a water tank there which is holding water that can be used to fight the fire. You might be up around 40 to 50,000. So, and you put that in, it's a depreciable, so you can write that off over a few years.
Yeah.
To me, it's small change to having that risk.
Yeah. I guess it seems to providers that it's a I guess you obviously can't do it if you're renting, but if they're owning the property, then obviously it's a long-term investment.
Correct.
Yeah. What do you see as are there any other challenges for SIL providers when it comes to implementing fire safety measures that you're aware of?
Oh, the biggest one, and it sort of comes back to sprinklers and the like, is financial. When we do speak to SILs and even SDA providers and SILs that are delivering services with an SDA, trying to get sprinklers installed into Class 1B buildings, which isn't mandatory. There's a big resistance for that. And the owners of the SDA or the SIL building and the SIL providers are taking a great deal of risk, especially if it's a SIL provider who's using the building as a supported accommodation, which is inappropriate to how the building is designed. A house is designed for an individual or family members. It hasn't been designed to house multiple people with disability.
Mm. Yeah. Right. So far we've talked about the importance of fire safety. We've talked about planning, drills, some of the challenges. Is there anything else you think is really important for us to talk about when we're talking about fire safety in SIL?
I think one of the key things is PEEPs need to be prepared, because as soon as you go through a checklist for a personal emergency evacuation plan, it's going to identify the issues. It'll identify the abilities of the participant. It'll identify if there's any shortfalls in the house in terms of evacuating. You might have access through the front of the house with a ramp access, but your door at the back of the house may have steps. So now our paths of travel to egress are restricted to one exits. And if you've got a bedroom at one end, you've got a kitchen in the middle, and the exit doors at the other side, and the obviously a high chance of fires in kitchens, your now path of travel is blocked for people with disabilities. So all that thing needs to be really considered when developing the PEEP. Then you've got to look at what assistance equipment might be needed. Is hoisting going to be required to get participants out of bed? Have they got motorised wheelchairs? Where are the motorised wheelchairs being charged? Are they hopefully not being charged in their bedroom? Because the increased risk of fire. So are they being charged in the garage? So have you got a temporary measure like an evacuation chair or similar that can be used in the bedrooms to take the person with disability out of the home, rather than having to go get their motorised chair, bring it in? And if you've got sprinklers activated, you want to minimise the amount of water around transformers and motorised wheelchairs. So that's probably the second one. If fire sprinklers haven't been installed, and I'll just keep repeating that, get them installed, because that reduces so much risk. Build the relationships, as I mentioned earlier, with the local fireys, because they're wonderful. They will take the time. They'll come around, invite them around for a breakfast or something, and you'll get a couple of them around, and you'll be able to go through the evacuation planning, and they'll certainly be very provide constructive advice on how to improve that. They won't hesitate, and people sort of think, no, we can't do that, but I can stress that they will provide help in that regards. And also the evacuation kit. So if there is an evacuation, again, when the first responders arrive on site, that information there is in a red bag or similar. The carer can then provide advice. So we've got these participants in these bedrooms. This one will need carrying out. This one can walk out. And it'll then speed up that whole evacuation process for the staff members, and hopefully get everyone out as safe as quick as we can.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a great point around the PEEP as well, the personal emergency evacuation plan, is that it's, when I see them often, providers are completely confused by them, and they're like, why do we need these? But really, it's not actually a document for them, is it? It's kind of a document for first responders in many ways as well, that just clearly outlines all the things that need to know. So it's also about, how is that information going to be given over? Make it simple, make it easy, have it somewhere that's stored, like, in units. Is it in the fire panel? Is it, if you're in a house, is it in a red folder near the door? All of those kind of implications or strategies to make it as simple as possible to get that information to the first responders in an emergency.
Correct. Yeah, 100%. It is exactly for the first responders. On our other website, which is Equal Access or Disability Access Consultants, we've actually got PEEP templates in there. So there is templates in there for SDA, and it's got 3 documents. One is a guide on how to prepare a PEEP. The second one's a spreadsheet, which has got multiple questions you go through. And then at the end of that, doing that spreadsheet, it gives you a summary of the consideration or the abilities of the person, the building restrictions, the consideration, and then you just simply transfer that basic information across onto a template document, a one-pager, that is provided for the firey. So you just fill that out, laminate it, have everything laminated, have the floor plan laminated, because sprinklers go off or the fireys, that information can be handed straight over to them, and hopefully getting people out safely.
Wonderful advice. If there is anyone listening who wants to get in touch with you, who's got further questions about SDA Consulting or what you do, what's the best way for them to get in touch?
Email contact us form on the website, or 03 9001 5805.
Thanks so much for joining me today, Bruce.
Thank you, Tania.
That's a wrap on this episode of SILosophy. If this resonated with you, take a second to subscribe and share it with someone in the SIL space who really needs to hear this. Don't forget to connect with Tania Gomez Consulting on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook for more resources, conversations, and support to help you grow your impact. Thanks for listening. Until next time, keep making a difference.